She fell asleep with her resume on the Millionaire's shoulder. He just read it and smiled, and the next day, Claire stood before her bedroom mirror, smoothing down her dark green dress for the 100th time. The invitation to the Sustainable Future Leaders Dinner sat on her dresser, its elegant letterhead catching the late afternoon light. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked it up again, reading the words she'd already memorized. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. After 3 years of working at small environmental nonprofits, this dinner could be her chance to break into the bigger leagues of sustainability work. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and grabbed her portfolio, complete with fresh copies of her resume. The venue, a renovated historical building in downtown, took her breath away. Living walls of green plants stretched from floor to ceiling, and soft lighting cast a warm glow over the exposed brick walls. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, their light reflecting off the water glasses at each carefully set place. "Name, please?" A host in a crisp black uniform stood at a podium near the entrance. "Claire Bennett." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. The host smiled, checking his list. "Table 7, Ms. Bennett. Right this way." Claire followed him through the room, past clusters of well-dressed professionals engaged in animated conversation. She recognized some faces from sustainability magazines and news articles, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and environmental leaders she'd admired from afar. At table 7, most seats were still empty. Claire settled into her assigned chair, spreading her napkin across her lap. She pulled out her resume, keeping it ready but hidden under the edge of the tablecloth. Her heart pounded as other guests began filling the surrounding seats. "Is this seat taken?" a warm voice asked from her left. Claire looked up and felt her breath catch. A man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit stood there, his presence somehow both commanding and gentle. His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and there was something immediately trustworthy about his face. "No, please." Claire gestured to the empty chair, trying to keep her voice steady. He sat down with fluid grace. "I'm Jack," he said, extending his hand. His handshake was firm but not overwhelming. "Claire Bennett," she replied, surprising herself with how natural it felt. "Do you attend many of these events?" Jack's laugh was rich and genuine. "Only when they're truly worth it." Tonight's guest list is particularly interesting. People who care about more than just the bottom line. The conversation flowed effortlessly after that. Jack asked thoughtful questions about her work with local environmental initiatives, showing genuine interest in even her smallest projects. He shared stories about sustainable architecture in developing countries, his eyes lighting up when describing solar-powered schools and water conservation systems. The 4-course meal appeared and disappeared, but Claire hardly noticed what she was eating. Jack's passion for environmental causes matched her own, and his insights into the industry opened her eyes to possibilities she hadn't considered. As the evening wore on, the gentle lighting and warm atmosphere began to work their magic. The excitement of the day, combined with the rich food and engaging conversation, made Claire's eyelids grow heavy. She found herself leaning slightly toward Jack's steady presence, her resume still tucked safely in her lap. The last thing she remembered was Jack's voice, soft and kind, discussing the future of green energy. Her head gently came to rest on his shoulder, the world growing fuzzy around the edges as sleep overtook her. Claire's eyes snapped open, and her heart nearly stopped when she realized where she was. The warmth of Jack's shoulder beneath her cheek made her face flush hot with embarrassment. She jerked upright, nearly knocking over her water glass in the process. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," she stammered, straightening up in her chair. Her resume crinkled in her lap, reminding her of just how unprofessional she must look. She smoothed the wrinkled paper with trembling fingers, wishing she could disappear under the elegant tablecloth. The other dinner guests were starting to gather their belongings, their chairs scraping against the hardwood floor. Claire couldn't bring herself to look at Jack, instead focusing on adjusting her dress and tucking loose strands of hair behind her ears. "I can't believe I fell asleep at a networking dinner," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Her chance to make connections, to prove herself worthy of this prestigious gathering. Surely she'd ruined it all with one poorly timed nap. "Claire," Jack's voice was gentle, carrying a hint of amusement. She forced herself to meet his eyes, expecting to find judgment or disappointment. Instead, his expression was warm and understanding. "You have nothing to apologize for," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Though I have to admit, that's the first time someone's fallen asleep during my passionate speech about solar panel efficiency." A surprised laugh escaped her lips before she could stop it. "I'm sure your speech was fascinating. She gestured helplessly. "It's been such a long day, and the food was so good, and my shoulder makes an excellent pillow," Jack suggested, his eyes twinkling. Claire felt her face grow even warmer, but she couldn't help smiling. "Apparently so, though I wouldn't recommend adding that to your business card." They shared a laugh, and Claire felt some of her tension ease. Still, as she watched the important figures in the room exchanging business cards and making plans for future meetings, her heart sank. She'd had one shot to make an impression on these industry leaders, and she'd spent it dozing on a stranger's shoulder. "I should probably," she began, gathering her things and carefully folding her now creased resume. "Head home and get some proper rest?" Jack finished for her, standing up and pushing in his chair. "That sounds like an excellent idea. It's been a pleasure meeting you, Claire." She nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. His polite dismissal confirmed her fears. She'd blown it. All her preparation, her hopes for making meaningful connections, had evaporated the moment she'd dozed off. "Thank you for being so understanding about, well, everything," she said, managing a small smile as she stood. The elegant room suddenly felt too big, too grand for someone who couldn't even stay awake during dinner. "These events can be overwhelming," Jack said kindly. "Sometimes the most memorable connections come from unexpected moments." But Claire could read between the lines. Memorable didn't necessarily mean professional or impressive. She'd be remembered all right, as the woman who fell asleep at the Sustainable Future Leaders dinner. Claire rolled over in bed, squinting at the sunlight streaming through her curtains. Her alarm hadn't gone off yet, but her mind was already replaying last night's events like a movie she couldn't pause. She groaned and pulled her pillow over her face, remembering how she'd dozed off on Jack's shoulder. "At least I didn't drool," she muttered to herself, then sat bolt upright. "Wait, did I drool?" She touched her face reflexively, as if she could check for evidence from the night before. Her tiny studio apartment felt especially cramped this morning, with last night's outfit draped over her reading chair and her dress shoes kicked off by the door. The fancy name tag from the dinner sat on her nightstand, mocking her with its gold lettering, "Claire Anderson, Sustainability Innovation." She padded to her compact kitchen, waiting for her ancient coffee maker to sputter to life. As she spooned coffee grounds into the filter, she found herself remembering bits of her conversation with Jack before her impromptu nap. They'd talked about coral reef restoration, and he'd seemed genuinely interested in her ideas about sustainable urban farming. "Maybe it wasn't a complete disaster," she said to her coffee mug, decorated with faded pictures of endangered species. "He did laugh with me, not at me, when I woke up." The morning sun cast a warm glow across her small desk, where her laptop sat waiting. Claire settled into her chair, taking comfort in her usual morning routine. She opened her email expecting the usual flood of newsletters and work messages. Her coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. There, at the top of her inbox, was an email from Jack Morrison. Her heart began to race as she clicked it open, nearly spilling her coffee in the process. Dear Claire, I hope you got home safely last night and managed to get some proper rest, preferably not on any stranger's shoulders this time. I actually found our conversation about urban sustainability fascinating, particularly your insights about vertical farming techniques. I'm working on something that I think would interest you, a project that could change how we approach urban environmental challenges. It's still in its early stages and needs to stay under wraps for now, but I'd love to get your perspective. This isn't a job interview or a formal meeting. Think of it more as a collaboration between two people who care about making real change happen. Would you be interested in meeting for coffee this week to discuss it? Best regards, Jack. Claire read the email 3 times, her embarrassment from the night before melting into unexpected relief. Not only had she not completely ruined her chances of making a meaningful connection, but Jack had actually been impressed by their conversation, the parts where she'd been awake, at least. But what caught her attention most was the mention of a secret project. Her mind raced with possibilities. What kind of environmental project needed to be kept under wraps? And why would Jack, who seemed to be such an important figure in the sustainability world, want her input? She glanced at the small potted plants on her windowsill, each one a tiny experiment in urban gardening. Maybe her unconventional ideas weren't so impractical after all. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she considered her response, a mixture of curiosity and excitement building in her chest. This wasn't at all what she'd expected when she'd woken up this morning, but somehow it felt like exactly what she'd been waiting for. Claire stood in front of a towering glass building in downtown, double-checking the address on her phone. The modern structure gleamed in the morning sun, its windows tinted a subtle green. She smoothed her blouse, took a deep breath, and walked through the revolving doors. The lobby felt more like an art gallery than an office, with living walls of emerald plants stretching from floor to ceiling. A security guard checked her ID and directed her to the elevator. "Floor 42, he said with a friendly nod. Her stomach did flip-flops as the elevator climbed. When the doors opened, she stepped into a bright, open space filled with natural light. Potted trees dotted the office, and she noticed solar panels visible through the windows, angled to catch the morning sun. "Claire," Jack's warm voice caught her attention. He looked different today, in dark jeans and a casual button-down shirt, more relaxed than at the dinner. "Thanks for coming. Coffee?" He led her to a small meeting room where a French press and 2 ceramic mugs waited. The room's walls were made of some sort of frosted glass that turned clear when Jack pressed a button. "Privacy glass," he explained, pouring the coffee. "We like to keep things confidential here." "This is..." Claire searched for the right word. "Unexpected. The whole building seems so... corporate?" Jack smiled, settling into a chair. "That's kind of the point. Nobody looks twice at another office building downtown, but this is actually a testing ground for sustainable architecture and urban farming techniques." Claire leaned forward, intrigued. "Is this your company?" Jack's expression turned thoughtful. "Not exactly. Look, Claire, before we go any further, I need to be honest with you." He paused, studying his coffee. "The person you met at the dinner, the businessman everyone thinks they know, that's not really me." Claire's brow furrowed. "I don't understand." "I'm what you might call a behind-the-scenes operator. I fund environmental projects through various channels, but I keep my name out of it. No press, no publicity, no corporate boards." He ran a hand through his hair. "The media attention, the corporate world, it all comes with strings attached. I've seen too many good projects get corrupted by profit margins and shareholder expectations." Claire sat back, processing this information. So you're like a secret environmentalist? Jack chuckled. Something like that. The dinner was actually rare for me. I usually send representatives to those events, but your application caught my attention. Your ideas about urban farming, they're exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. But why all the secrecy? Because money changes things, Jack said simply. When projects get too much attention, they become targets. Big corporations want to buy them out, water them down, turn them into PR opportunities. I prefer to work quietly, fund projects that make real change, and let them succeed on their own merits. Claire stared at her coffee, her mind racing. The man sitting across from her wasn't the polished business executive she'd imagined. Instead, he was something far more interesting. A mysterious advocate working in the shadows to protect environmental initiatives from exploitation. So, Jack continued, now that you know who I really am, would you be interested in hearing about the project? Claire looked up, meeting his steady gaze. The truth about Jack's identity was shocking, but somehow it made perfect sense. She nodded, curiosity burning stronger than ever. Jack pulled out a sleek tablet from his desk drawer and slid it across the table. This is what we've been working on for the past year. The screen displayed a series of innovative greenhouse designs, each more impressive than the last. Claire's eyes widened as she swiped through the images. These are incredible. The vertical integration, the water recycling systems. She paused on one particular design. Something about it seemed familiar. The lead architect on this project might be someone you know, Jack said carefully, watching her reaction. Robert Henderson. Claire's hand froze over the tablet. The coffee she'd just sipped turned bitter in her mouth. My father? Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Yes. Jack leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. I didn't know about your connection at first. It wasn't until after the dinner that I did some background research. Claire set the tablet down, her fingers trembling slightly. I haven't spoken to him in 5 years. The words felt heavy in her mouth. He's developed some groundbreaking systems for sustainable agriculture, Jack continued gently. But we need someone with fresh perspectives to take it further. Your ideas about urban farming solutions could be exactly what this project needs. Memories flooded back, heated arguments about her career choices, her father's disapproval of her impractical environmental studies degree, doors slamming, years of silence. He always said my ideas were too idealistic, she said, trying to keep the bitterness from her voice. People change, Claire. From what I've seen, your father's work has evolved significantly in recent years. He's become quite the advocate for innovative environmental solutions. Claire stood up and walked to the window, needing space to think. The city sprawled below, a concrete jungle that could benefit from the very projects they were discussing. It's complicated, she finally said. Most important things are. Jack joined her at the window. Look, I'm not trying to force a family reunion. This is about the work that could make a real difference. Your father's designs combined with your fresh approach to urban farming could create something revolutionary. Claire pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Does he know about this? About me? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. She appreciated that at least. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. The excitement of the project, the potential impact it could have, the knot in her stomach at the thought of facing her father again. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Jack nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. He handed her a small card with a private number. When you're ready to talk more, call me directly. Claire gathered her things, her movements mechanical. The tablet's screen had gone dark, but she could still see those designs in her mind, her father's work, so innovative, so different from the rigid thinking she remembered. As the elevator descended, Claire felt like her world had tilted on its axis. The project was exactly the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed of, but the price of admission seemed steep. Excitement about the potential impact warred with the old hurt and resentment she thought she'd buried. Stepping out into the sunlight, Claire clutched Jack's card tightly in her hand. The morning had brought more than just a potential career opportunity. It had cracked open a door she'd firmly closed years ago, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to peek through it. Back in her small apartment, Claire sat cross-legged on her couch, her laptop balanced precariously on a cushion. The soft glow of the screen illuminated her face as she typed her father's name into the search bar. Robert Henderson's professional profile appeared first, a list of achievements she'd never bothered to look up before. Lead environmental engineer at Greenscale Solutions, she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. The company name caught her attention. She opened a new tab and dug deeper. Hours ticked by as Claire followed the digital breadcrumbs. Greenscale Solutions was just the surface. Beneath it lay a web of smaller companies and research initiatives. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, opening tab after tab. News articles, press releases, and financial reports painted a picture she hadn't expected. "No way," she muttered, sitting up straighter. There it was, buried in the fine print of a corporate filing. Jack's name appeared as a silent partner in 3 different environmental research companies, all connected to her father's work. The earliest investment dated back 7 years. Claire reached for her now cold coffee, her hand shaking slightly. 7 years. Jack had been funding her father's projects since before their falling out. The timing couldn't be coincidental. She pulled up photos from various project launches. Her father appeared in several, looking older than she remembered, his dark hair now streaked with gray. In one image, he stood proudly next to a revolutionary water filtration system. In another, he was explaining sustainable farming techniques to a group of students. The Robert Henderson in these photos didn't match the rigid, disapproving father in her memories. This man looked passionate, engaged, and surprisingly progressive in his approach to environmental solutions. "Who are you?" she whispered to the image on her screen. The night grew deeper as Claire continued her research. She found articles her father had written about the importance of innovative thinking in environmental science. One piece specifically mentioned the value of young voices in the field. Words that felt like a stark contrast to his dismissal of her ideas years ago. Her phone showed 2 a.m. when she finally closed her laptop. Sleep felt impossible as she paced her small living room, her mind racing. The project Jack offered was exactly what she'd been working toward. A chance to make real change, to implement her ideas on a significant scale. But working with her father? The thought made her stomach churn. Claire walked to her window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The city lights twinkled below, a constellation of artificial stars. Somewhere out there, her father was probably working late, too. He always did. Was he still the same man who'd told her she was wasting her time with impractical dreams? Or was he the person in those articles, the one who spoke about innovation and fresh perspectives? She pulled Jack's card from her pocket, turning it over in her hands. The decision seemed impossible. Taking the project meant facing her past, reopening old wounds. Refusing it meant letting go of an opportunity that could make a real difference in the world. Claire collapsed onto her bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep remained elusive as questions tumbled through her mind. How could she work alongside her father after 5 years of silence? How could she refuse a project that aligned so perfectly with her goals? And Jack, what was his role in all of this? Had he orchestrated this entire situation? The night stretched on, leaving Claire no closer to answers, torn between her professional dreams and the emotional tangle of her past. Claire's heels clicked against the polished floor as she made her way through the modern office building. Her reflection in the glass walls showed a woman who looked more confident than she felt. She adjusted her blazer, took a deep breath, and knocked on Jack's office door. "Come in," his warm voice called out. Jack stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, silhouetted against the morning sun. He turned to face her, his expression brightening. "Claire, I'm glad you came." She managed a small smile, settling into one of the comfortable chairs across from his desk. "I spent all night thinking about your offer." Jack sat down, his movements deliberate and calm. "And?" "I want to be part of the project," Claire said, her voice steadier than she expected. "The environmental impact potential is too important to let personal issues get in the way." Jack nodded, his eyes studying her face. "That couldn't have been an easy decision." "It wasn't," Claire admitted, fidgeting with her watch. "But I've worked too hard to let this opportunity slip away. The sustainable housing initiative you described, it could change lives. That's exactly why I wanted you on board." Jack leaned forward, his enthusiasm evident. "Your thesis on urban sustainability showed innovative thinking that aligned perfectly with our goals." Claire blinked in surprise. "You read my thesis?" "Of course. Your ideas about incorporating green spaces in low-income housing developments were brilliant." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. "That's actually where I'd like you to start." As Claire flipped through the preliminary plans, her professional excitement began to override her personal anxieties. The project was even more ambitious than she'd imagined. Sustainable housing that would be both environmentally friendly and affordable. These plans... She traced a finger along one of the diagrams. "They're incorporating some of the concepts from my research." Jack smiled. "That's why you're here, Claire. We need your perspective, your fresh ideas." He paused, his expression growing serious. "I know the situation with your father complicates things, but I want you to know that your role in this project stands on its own merit." Claire felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "I appreciate that. She took a deep breath. "I need to know, will I be working directly with him?" "Your father heads the engineering division," Jack explained gently. "There will be some overlap, but you'll be leading your own team in urban development planning. You'll report directly to me." Claire nodded, relief mixing with determination. "Then I'm all in." They spent the next hour reviewing project details, and Claire found herself getting caught up in the possibilities, her notebook filled with ideas and questions as Jack outlined their timeline and goals. "We'll have your office ready by Monday," Jack said, as their meeting drew to a close. "Take the weekend to review these materials." He handed her a tablet with secured project files. Standing to leave, Claire felt different than when she'd arrived. The knot of anxiety about her father was still there, but it was overshadowed by a growing sense of purpose. This was bigger than their family drama. This was about creating real change. "Thank you, Jack," she said, pausing at the door, "for seeing potential in my work." "You did that all on your own," he replied with a kind smile. "I just provided the opportunity." As Claire walked back through the office building, her mind was already racing with possibilities for the project. The weight of her father's involvement still pressed against her thoughts, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. Scene 1. A new beginning. Claire arrived early Monday morning, her stomach fluttering with nervous energy. The office space Jack had prepared for her was modern and bright, with a wall of windows overlooking the city. A small potted plant sat on her desk, a thoughtful touch that made her smile. She was arranging her belongings when Jack appeared in her doorway, dressed in his usual impeccable style. "Ready to meet the team?" Claire smoothed her blazer and nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. The conference room was already filled with people when they arrived. Jack introduced her to faces and names she tried desperately to remember. Sarah from Environmental Impact Assessment, Marcus from Urban Planning, Dr. Chen from Sustainable Technologies, and several others. Claire noticed an empty chair near the end of the table, wondering if it was meant for her father. Jack began the presentation, and Claire's eyes widened as he outlined the full scope of the project. The Sustainable Housing Initiative wasn't just about a few buildings. It was about transforming entire neighborhoods. The plans included everything from solar power integration to community gardens, water recycling systems, to shared green spaces. Our goal, Jack explained, pointing to a detailed map, is to create a blueprint for sustainable urban living that can be replicated worldwide. Claire's research on incorporating green spaces in low-income areas will be crucial to this vision. Claire felt all eyes turned to her, but instead of anxiety, she felt a surge of excitement. She stood up and walked to the screen, pointing out specific areas where her concepts could be implemented. The team listened intently, asking questions and offering suggestions. Ideas flowed freely, and Claire found herself scribbling notes frantically to keep up with the creative energy in the room. During the lunch break, Jack guided Claire to a quiet corner of the office's rooftop garden. The space was filled with native plants and experimental growing systems, a living laboratory for sustainable urban agriculture. "This is incredible," Claire said, running her fingers along the leaves of a tomato plant. "The whole project is so much bigger than I imagined." Jack nodded, his expression serious but passionate. "What we're doing here isn't just about building eco-friendly houses. It's about changing how people live, how they interact with their environment." He paused, looking out over the city. "Your research on community engagement in sustainable practices, that's exactly what we need. You understand that this isn't just about technology, it's about people." Claire felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "I've always believed that environmental solutions need to be accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. That's precisely why I wanted you on this team." Jack turned to face her, his eyes bright with conviction. "Your expertise in combining social responsibility with environmental sustainability, it's rare to find someone who understands both aspects so deeply." As they discussed specific implementation strategies, Claire began to truly grasp the magnitude of what they were attempting. This wasn't just another corporate sustainability initiative. It was a comprehensive attempt to reshape urban living. The care and thought Jack had put into every aspect of the project reflected a deep, genuine commitment to environmental change. "We have a chance to make a real difference here," Jack said, his voice quiet but intense. "Not just for one community, but for communities everywhere." Looking at the determination in Jack's face, Claire felt her own sense of purpose strengthen. Despite her personal complications with her father's involvement, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. A familiar face. Claire was reviewing blueprints in the conference room when she heard the door open. Without looking up, she called out, "I'll be done in just a minute, Jack." "Hello, Claire." The familiar voice made her freeze. Her hands gripped the edge of the table as she slowly raised her head. There, standing in the doorway with graying hair and tired eyes, was her father, Robert Wilson. "Dad?" The word felt foreign on her tongue. She hadn't spoken it in years. He looked older than she remembered, his face more lined, but his eyes still held that same intense focus she remembered from her childhood. He wore a simple button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, so unlike Jack's polished appearance. "I didn't know you'd be here today," Claire managed, straightening the papers in front of her with trembling hands. "Jack asked me to come in for a consultation on the water recycling systems." Robert shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his discomfort evident. "You look well." Claire nodded stiffly. Thanks. You too. The silence stretched between them like a physical barrier. I've been following your work, he said finally. Your research on urban green spaces is impressive. Really? Claire couldn't keep the edge from her voice. I thought you were too busy with your own projects to notice what anyone else was doing. Robert flinched slightly, but held his ground. I deserve that. But Claire, I've always... We should focus on the project, Claire cut him off, gesturing to the blueprints. That's why we're both here, right? For the next hour, they worked together in a strange dance of professional courtesy and personal distance. Claire watched as her father explained the intricacies of his water recycling design to the team. His hands moved animatedly as he spoke about conservation methods and sustainable water usage, his eyes lighting up with the same passion she remembered from her childhood. It was that passion that had made him miss so many school plays and soccer games. That dedication that had left her mother to handle everything else while he traveled the world, saving it one environmental project at a time. The same drive that now had him working alongside Jack, trying to revolutionize urban living. As she observed him pointing out specific details in the designs, Claire felt the familiar anger bubbling up inside her. He could get so excited about water systems and conservation methods, but where was that enthusiasm when she'd needed him? When she'd graduated? When Mom got sick? But there was something else too. Something she hadn't expected. Watching him work, seeing his genuine excitement about creating sustainable solutions, she recognized a reflection of herself. The same fire that drove her to pursue her own environmental career burned in his eyes. Robert looked up from the blueprints and caught her watching him. For a moment, their eyes met, and Claire saw something there. Regret, perhaps, or hope. He offered a small, tentative smile, and despite herself, Claire felt a tiny crack appear in the wall she'd built around her heart. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for both kinds of passion in their lives, the drive to save the world and the desire to mend what was broken between them. Long nights, deep talks. The office took on a different atmosphere after dark. The usual bustling of phones and hurried footsteps gave way to a peaceful quiet, broken only by the gentle hum of Claire's laptop and the occasional rustle of papers. She and Jack had fallen into a comfortable routine of working late, their dedication to the project keeping them both long after others had gone home. Tonight, they sat across from each other at the conference table, surrounded by stacks of environmental impact reports. Claire looked up from her laptop to find Jack rubbing his tired eyes. Maybe we should take a break, she suggested, stretching her arms above her head. We've been at this for hours. Jack nodded, leaning back in his chair. You're right. Want some tea? He stood up and walked to the small kitchen area, where he kept an impressive collection of herbal teas. Chamomile, if you have it, Claire replied, watching as he moved with practiced ease through the familiar motions of preparing their drinks. When he returned with 2 steaming mugs, Claire noticed the way his usually pristine shirt sleeves were rolled up, his tie loosened. There was something endearing about seeing him slightly disheveled. You know, she said, warming her hands around the mug, I don't think I've ever met someone as committed to environmental causes as you are. Well, except maybe my father, she added with a slight grimace. Jack's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. That's quite a compliment, considering Robert's reputation in the field. He paused, taking a thoughtful sip of his tea. Though I suspect our motivations might be different. What do you mean? Jack set his mug down carefully, his fingers tracing the rim. Your father seems driven by the science, the technical challenges. For me, it's more personal. He fell quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. I grew up in a small coastal town. My family had lived there for generations, running a small fishing business. Claire leaned forward, drawn in by the unexpected glimpse into his past. When I was 15, a large corporation built a processing plant upstream. Within 2 years, the water was polluted, the fish were dying, and my family lost everything. His voice remained steady, but Claire could hear the old pain beneath the surface. My father fought them in court, tried to hold them accountable. But they had too much money, too many lawyers. He died before the case was settled. "Jack, I'm so sorry," Claire said softly, resisting the urge to reach across the table and take his hand. "That's why I work the way I do," he continued, meeting her eyes. "Behind the scenes, avoiding publicity. The moment you become a public figure, they try to discredit you, buy you out, or worse. I learned that staying invisible can sometimes be more powerful than being in the spotlight." Claire nodded, understanding flooding through her. All of Jack's secrecy, his careful planning, his insistence on privacy. It wasn't about ego or mystique. It was about protection and effectiveness. "But why tell me this?" she asked. "Because I trust you, Claire." The simple honesty in his voice made her heart skip. "And because I want you to understand that this isn't just a project for me. It's a mission." In the soft light of the office, Claire saw Jack differently. Not as the mysterious millionaire or the brilliant environmentalist, but as someone who had faced loss and chosen to channel it into something meaningful. She saw the warmth in his eyes, the quiet strength in his shoulders, and felt something shift in her chest. A recognition of kinship that went beyond their shared work. Facing the past, Claire's hands trembled as she stood outside her father's office door. The nameplate read, "Dr. Robert Henderson," in simple black letters. Taking a deep breath, she knocked. "Come in," called the familiar voice. She pushed the door open to find her father hunched over his desk, surrounded by research papers and environmental studies. He looked up, surprise crossing his weathered face. "Claire?" He quickly removed his reading glasses. "I wasn't expecting—" "We need to talk, Dad." Claire's voice was steadier than she felt. She closed the door behind her and sat in one of the chairs facing his desk. Robert shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Of course." He cleared his throat. "Would you like some water?" "No." Claire clasped her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. "I need to say something, and I need you to listen." The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of unspoken words. Claire could hear the gentle whir of the air conditioning and the muffled sounds of activity from the hallway. "You weren't there," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "After Mom died, when I needed you most, you buried yourself in your work. I was 16, Dad. 16 and alone." Robert's face fell, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Claire, please, let me finish." She took another deep breath. "I understand now that your work is important. I see the impact you're making. But back then, I just needed my father. Not the renowned environmentalist, not the brilliant scientist, just my dad." Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Every time you missed a parent-teacher conference, every birthday you forgot, every dinner you skipped, it felt like you were choosing your work over me." Robert's shoulders slumped. He looked older suddenly, more vulnerable than Claire had ever seen him. "You're right," he said softly. "I failed you." He stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the city below. "After your mother died, I couldn't handle the grief. The work became my escape. Every project, every study, they were things I could control when everything else felt like it was falling apart." He turned back to face her. "But that's no excuse. I should have been there for you." "Then why weren't you?" Claire's voice cracked. "Because I was a coward," he admitted. "Because facing you meant facing the loss of your mother every day. But in trying to protect myself, I hurt you instead." He moved closer, gesturing to the wall of awards and certificates. All of this work, all these achievements, they've helped protect thousands of acres of wilderness, saved endangered species, cleaned up polluted waterways. But my biggest regret is that I sacrificed my relationship with you to do it. Claire felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of pain she'd carried for so long beginning to unravel. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Dad. I just wish we could have done it together. Robert's eyes welled with tears. Is it too late for that now? Claire stood up, taking a tentative step toward him. I don't know. But working on this project with Jack, seeing your passion for the environment up close again, it's helped me understand you better. Maybe we can start there. I'd like that, Robert said quietly. He reached out, hesitated, then gently squeezed her shoulder. I'd like that very much. Claire nodded, feeling lighter than she had in years. The pain wasn't gone, but it had shifted, making room for something new to grow in its place. Scene 1. Testing limits. Claire stared at the spreadsheets on her computer screen until the numbers began to blur together. The project's timeline was falling behind, and their latest environmental impact assessment had revealed complications they hadn't anticipated. She rubbed her tired eyes and glanced at the clock. 9:45 p.m. The office was nearly empty, except for the soft glow from Jack's office down the hall. The evening cleaning crew had already come and gone, leaving behind the faint smell of lemon-scented cleaner. This can't be right, she muttered, double-checking the calculations. But the numbers didn't lie. Their projected carbon offset estimates were falling well short of their goals. The innovative filtration system they'd designed wasn't performing as efficiently as their models had predicted. Claire's phone buzzed with another message from one of their investors, asking for an update on their progress. She ignored it, adding it to the growing pile of unanswered emails and messages. Her stomach churned with anxiety. The sound of footsteps made her look up. Jack appeared in her doorway, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "You're still here," he said, though it wasn't really a question. "These numbers—" Claire gestured helplessly at her screen. "We promised the board a 30% reduction in emissions, but we're barely hitting 15. The filtration system isn't working like we thought it would." Jack pulled up a chair and sat beside her desk. "Show me." She pulled up the latest test results, explaining the technical issues they'd encountered. The innovative design that had seemed so promising in the lab was struggling in real-world conditions. Each failed test meant more delays, more costs, more disappointed stakeholders. "What if we can't fix it?" Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. "We've got millions of dollars invested in this project. My father's reputation is on the line. Your reputation." She stood up and began pacing the office. "Everyone's counting on this working, and I feel like I'm letting them all down." "Claire," Jack started, but she continued. "Maybe I was in over my head from the start. This project, it's bigger than anything I've ever worked on. The pressure from the investors, the board meetings, the technical challenges." She stopped at the window, staring out at the city lights below. "What if I'm not cut out for this?" The weight of responsibility felt crushing. Every decision she made could impact not just the project, but the environment they were trying to protect. The stakes were impossibly high, and she felt woefully unprepared. "I keep thinking about all the people who are depending on this working," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "The communities that need cleaner air, the ecosystems we're trying to protect. What if we fail them all?" Jack stood up and joined her at the window. "You know what I see when I look at these setbacks?" he asked quietly. "I see proof that we're trying something that's never been done before. If it were easy, someone else would have already done it." But Claire shook her head. "That's just it. Maybe someone else should be doing it. Someone more qualified, more experienced." She turned away from the window, gathering her things. "I don't know if I can handle this level of pressure. Every time I think we're making progress, something else goes wrong." The doubt that had been gnawing at her for days finally spilled out. "What if I'm not the right person for this job? Jack? What if I'm not capable of making the difference we need to make?" She slumped back into her chair, feeling the full weight of their challenges pressing down on her shoulders. The path ahead seemed increasingly impossible, and for the first time since joining the project, Claire wasn't sure she had what it took to see it through. Claire sat alone in her apartment the next morning, a cup of coffee growing cold beside her laptop. Instead of diving straight into work, she found herself scrolling through photos from the past few months, team meetings, project milestones, and candid moments captured during late-night work sessions. She paused at a picture from their first successful prototype test. Her father stood next to her, both of them beaming at the camera, their matching protective goggles pushed up on their foreheads. It was the first time she'd seen him truly smile in years. "I've come so far," she whispered to herself, tracing her finger across the screen. The morning sun streamed through her windows as she opened her project journal. She'd started keeping it during her first week, documenting not just technical details but personal observations and feelings. Flipping through the pages, she saw her own transformation written in black and white. Her early entries were filled with uncertainty and self-doubt. But as the weeks progressed, she noticed a change. Her notes became more confident, her solutions more innovative. She'd gone from someone afraid to speak up in meetings to someone the team looked to for leadership. Claire pulled out her latest technical drawings and spread them across her coffee table. The filtration system's design stared back at her, complex but familiar now. She thought about how, just months ago, she would have been intimidated by such an intricate system. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes and let her mind wander over everything she'd learned. The technical skills were important, but it was the other lessons that really stood out: how to lead a team, how to persist through failures, how to rebuild a relationship with her father, one conversation at a time. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jack. "How are you holding up?" As she typed a response, something clicked in her mind. She glanced back at the filtration system drawings, then quickly pulled up the original design specifications on her laptop. Her heart began to race as she spotted something she hadn't noticed before. "The pressure distribution," she muttered, grabbing a pencil. "We've been thinking about it all wrong." Claire's hands flew across paper as she sketched out a new design. Instead of trying to force the system to work harder, they needed to work smarter. The solution wasn't more power, it was better flow dynamics. She grabbed her keys and rushed to the office, barely remembering to put on shoes. When she burst through the door of the project room, her team looked up in surprise. "I think I've got it," she announced, spreading her drawings across the conference table. "We've been trying to increase the filtration capacity by adding more pressure, but that's what's causing the system to fail. What if we redesigned the flow pattern instead?" As she explained her concept, she could see the excitement building in her colleagues' faces. Even her father, who had just walked in, was nodding along with growing enthusiasm. "This could work," he said, studying the drawings. "The energy efficiency would be significantly better, and the stress on the system would be reduced." Jack leaned forward, his eyes bright with interest. "How soon can we test it?" Claire felt a surge of confidence as she answered. "We can have a prototype ready by the end of the week. I've already worked out most of the modifications we'll need." Looking around at her team's eager faces, Claire realized something important. The pressure she'd felt wasn't just weight on her shoulders. It was the force pushing her to grow, to learn, to become more than she thought she could be. For the first time in weeks, she felt truly excited about the challenges ahead. After the excitement of the breakthrough settled, Claire found herself alone with her father in the project room. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, and the usual buzz of office activity had quieted down. Her father stood by the whiteboard, absently erasing old calculations with trembling hands. "Claire," he said, his voice unusually soft. "Could we talk for a moment?" She nodded, settling into one of the chairs at the conference table. The leather squeaked beneath her as she adjusted her position, trying to get comfortable despite her racing heart. "What you did today was remarkable," he began, capping the eraser and setting it down carefully. "Watching you work, seeing how you've grown." He paused, running a hand through his graying hair. "It made me realize how much I've missed." Claire's fingers traced the edge of the table, her eyes fixed on the wood grain. "Dad, no, please." He pulled up a chair across from her. "I need to say this." His shoulders slumped slightly, and for the first time, Claire noticed how tired he looked. "I was wrong, Claire. For so many years, I was just wrong." The air conditioning hummed softly in the background as he gathered his thoughts. "I convinced myself that what I was doing was for the greater good. Every missed dinner, every forgotten school event, every canceled weekend, I told myself it was worth it because I was working to save the environment." He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. "But I was blinded by my own ambition. I wanted to be the one who made the breakthrough, who solved the big problems. I thought success meant sacrificing everything else." His voice cracked slightly. "Including my relationship with you." Claire felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You were never there when I needed you," she said quietly. "I know." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I was so focused on trying to save the world that I forgot to be there for my own daughter. The science, the research, it became an obsession. I thought I was doing important work, but I failed to see that nothing was more important than being your father." A tear rolled down his cheek. "Watching you today, seeing how brilliant and capable you've become, it wasn't because of me, it was in spite of me. And I am so sorry, Claire." Claire's vision blurred as her own tears finally spilled over. She reached for a tissue from the box on the table, dabbing at her eyes. "I used to be so angry," she admitted. "I used to think you didn't care about me at all." "I've always cared," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I just didn't know how to show it. I didn't understand that love isn't about grand gestures or important work. It's about being there, day after day." Claire took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Your work is important, Dad. I see that now. But you're right. We lost something precious along the way." "Can you forgive me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire stood up and walked around the table. "I think I already have," she said softly. "And I want to help you with your part of the project. I've seen your calculations, and I think together we could make some improvements." Her father stood up, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. Then Claire stepped forward and hugged him, feeling his arms wrap around her in return. It wasn't a solution to everything, but it was a start, a chance to rebuild what they had lost, one small step at a time. The office buzzed with excitement as champagne corks popped and laughter filled the air. The project team had gathered in the main conference room, which had been transformed with strings of twinkling lights and a spread of catered food along the side table. Their latest breakthrough meant they were months ahead of schedule, and everyone could feel the electricity in the atmosphere. Claire stood near the window, taking in the scene before her. Her father was chatting animatedly with two younger researchers, gesturing enthusiastically as he explained something. Other team members clustered in small groups, their faces glowing with pride and satisfaction. Paper cups filled with sparkling wine clinked as people moved from group to group, sharing congratulations. "To the best team I could have hoped for," Jack's voice rang out above the chatter. He stood at the head of the conference table, raising his glass. Everyone turned to face him, lifting their own drinks in response. What we've accomplished here isn't just about meeting deadlines or hitting targets. It's about creating real change, and each one of you has played a crucial part in that. Claire felt her chest swell with pride as she looked around at her colleagues. In the months since she'd joined the project, these people had become more than just co-workers. They were a family, united by their shared passion and dedication. The celebration continued as someone turned on music, and the atmosphere grew even more festive. Claire found herself drawn into conversations about future possibilities, sharing ideas and dreams with people who truly understood her vision for a better world. She was in the middle of describing a new implementation strategy to one of the junior team members when she felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. It was Jack, his eyes bright with something that looked like more than just professional pride. "Would you mind stepping out for a moment?" he asked softly. Claire nodded, following him to the small balcony that overlooked the city. The evening air was cool and refreshing after the warmth of the crowded conference room. Streetlights twinkled below them like earthbound stars. "Claire," Jack began, turning to face her, "I wanted to tell you personally how grateful I am for everything you've brought to this project." His voice was warm, sincere. "When I first met you at that dinner, I knew you were special, but you've exceeded every expectation." She felt her cheeks flush at his praise. "I've just tried to do my best," she said modestly. "No." Jack shook his head, stepping closer. "You've done so much more than that. You've brought people together, found solutions where others saw only problems, and helped heal old wounds." His eyes met hers, and Claire felt her heart skip a beat. "The way you've worked with your father, how you've helped him open up and collaborate better with the team, it's been remarkable to watch." The city sounds faded into the background as they stood there, caught in a moment that felt both perfectly natural and somehow extraordinary. Jack's presence beside her felt right in a way she hadn't expected. "I'm proud of the work we've done together," he said softly, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder. "And I'm especially proud of you, Claire." In that moment, as the gentle evening breeze played with her hair and Jack's words wrapped around her heart, Claire felt something shift inside her. The admiration and respect she'd always felt for him began to transform into something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch. She realized with sudden clarity that her feelings for Jack had grown far beyond professional appreciation. The morning sun streamed through the office windows as Claire organized her notes from yesterday's celebration. Her desk was covered with project proposals and sustainability reports, but she couldn't help smiling as she remembered Jack's words from the previous evening. The way he'd looked at her on that balcony still made her heart flutter. Her phone buzzed against the desktop, dancing between stacks of paper. Claire glanced at the screen. An unknown number. She normally let such calls go to voicemail, but something made her pick up. "Hello, is this Claire Matthews?" The voice was professional, clinical. "I'm calling from Metro General Hospital." Claire's hand tightened around the phone. The world seemed to slow down as the nurse continued speaking, explaining that her father had collapsed during his morning presentation at the Environmental Research Center. Words like severe chest pain and currently stable filtered through the fog that was settling over her mind. "Ms. Matthews, are you there?" Claire realized she hadn't spoken for several seconds. Yes, I'm here. Which floor is he on?" After jotting down the details, Claire sat frozen at her desk. The project files in front of her suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the thought of her father lying in a hospital bed. They had only recently started rebuilding their relationship. There was still so much left unsaid, so much healing left to do. Her computer pinged with a new message from Jack about their afternoon meeting with potential investors. Claire stared at the screen, her vision blurring. The project needed her. They were at a crucial stage, and today's presentation could make or break their funding for the next phase. But the thought of sitting through meetings while her father was in the hospital made her stomach churn. She grabbed her purse with trembling hands and headed toward Jack's office. The hallway seemed longer than usual, each step heavy with indecision. Through the glass walls, she could see him preparing for the presentation, his face focused and determined. "Jack?" Her voice wavered as she knocked on his door frame. He looked up, his smile fading as he saw her expression. "Claire? What's wrong?" "My father's in the hospital," she said, the words catching in her throat. "He collapsed this morning. I need to go see him." Jack was on his feet immediately, concern etched across his features. "Of course, go. Don't worry about the presentation. I'll handle it." "But the investors are not as important as family," Jack said firmly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We've got this covered. Your father needs you." Claire nodded, grateful for his understanding but still feeling the weight of responsibility. As she hurried to the elevator, her phone buzzed again. Another message about the project deadlines. She silently tucked it away, her mind already racing ahead to the hospital. The taxi ride felt endless. Claire watched the city blur past her window, her thoughts ping-ponging between concern for her father and worry about the project. They had come so far in rebuilding their relationship. Weekly lunches, honest conversations about the past, even laughing together during team meetings. The thought of losing him now, just when they were finally connecting again, was unbearable. The hospital loomed ahead, its stark white walls reflecting the morning sun. Claire paid the driver and rushed toward the entrance, her heart pounding. As she approached the information desk, she realized she had no idea what she would find upstairs, or how she would balance everything if this turned out to be serious. The hospital corridor stretched before Claire like an endless tunnel, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the pale green walls. Her footsteps echoed against the linoleum floor as she followed a nurse to her father's room. The steady beeping of medical equipment grew louder with each step. Room 412. Claire hesitated at the doorway, her hand trembling against the frame. Through the small window, she could see her father lying in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. He looked smaller somehow, more fragile than she'd ever seen him. "Dad?" she whispered, stepping into the room. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with effort. A weak smile crossed his face. "Claire, you came." The simple words hit her like a punch to the gut. Of course she came, but the surprise in his voice made her realize how much damage their years of distance had done. She moved closer, settling into the chair beside his bed. "The doctors say it was a heart attack," he said, his voice rough. "Not a major one, but—" He gestured weakly at the machinery surrounding him. Claire reached for his hand, careful to avoid disturbing the IV line. His skin felt papery and cool beneath her fingers. "Why didn't you tell anyone you weren't feeling well?" "Had that big presentation today. The project—" He trailed off, closing his eyes briefly. "Couldn't let everyone down." Tears pricked at Claire's eyes. How many times had he put work first? How many times had she resented him for it? And now here she was, doing the same thing, thinking about project deadlines even as her father lay in a hospital bed. "I'm sorry," she blurted out. "I should have been around more. These past few weeks, even though we've been working together, I've still kept my distance. I've been so focused on proving myself, on the project." Her father squeezed her hand weakly. "Claire, you don't have to." No, I do, she insisted. We've wasted so much time being stubborn, holding on to old hurts, and now? She gestured at the hospital room, at all the medical equipment keeping watch over his vital signs. A nurse appeared in the doorway with a clipboard, checking readings and making notes. Claire watched as her father's eyes grew heavy, the medication making him drift in and out of consciousness. Pulling out her phone, Claire stared at the screen. 3 missed calls from the project team, and a gentle message from Jack asking how she was doing. The afternoon presentation would be starting soon. Important investors would be there, waiting to hear about their progress. But as she looked at her father's pale face, none of that seemed to matter anymore. They had lost so many years to misunderstandings and hurt feelings. She couldn't lose any more time. With steady fingers, she typed out a message to Jack. Need to take some time off. Dad's condition is serious. I have to be here for him. I'm sorry to leave you short-handed, but family has to come first this time. Jack's response came almost immediately. Take all the time you need. Family is what matters most. We've got things covered here. Claire set her phone aside and settled deeper into the chair, still holding her father's hand. The steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the silence as she prepared for a long vigil. This time, she would be there. This time, she would stay. Claire sat in the hospital room, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the window. Her father had been dozing on and off, but now he seemed more alert, his eyes clearer as he gazed at the get well cards scattered on his bedside table. You know, he said, his voice stronger than it had been earlier, I always kept every drawing you made of trees and animals when you were little. Claire looked up from her book, surprised. You did? He nodded, adjusting himself against the pillows. They're in a box in my office. I used to look at them during long nights when I was working on difficult projects. They reminded me why I was doing it all. I thought you kept them because they were about nature, Claire said softly. No, he replied, shaking his head. I kept them because they were from you. A nurse came in to check his vitals, and Claire watched as her father patiently answered the routine questions. When they were alone again, he turned to her with a thoughtful expression. I never told you about the Richardson project, did I? He asked. The one that took you away for most of my senior year? Claire couldn't keep the hint of bitterness from her voice. Her father's face fell. Yes, that one. We were fighting to protect a watershed that supplied water to 3 communities. The corporation wanting to build there had deep pockets and powerful lawyers. He paused, taking a deep breath. They offered me money to walk away. A lot of money. Money that could have paid for your college, given you everything you deserved. Claire felt her throat tighten. Dad. But if I had taken it, thousands of people would have lost their clean water source. Sometimes... He coughed slightly, reaching for the water glass beside his bed. Sometimes doing the right thing means making impossible choices. Claire helped him with the water, her hand steady as she held the glass. Why didn't you ever tell me about this? I didn't want to burden you with it. You were so young, and I thought... He sighed. I thought I was protecting you. Instead, I just made you feel abandoned. I used to think you loved your work more than me, Claire admitted, setting the glass down. Every time you missed a school event or came home late, I felt like I wasn't important enough. Her father's eyes welled with tears. You were always the most important thing in my life, Claire. I wanted to make the world better for you. I wanted you to have clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, forests to explore. But in focusing on the bigger picture, I lost sight of what was right in front of me. Claire took his hand, feeling the warmth returning to his skin. I understand now, Dad. Working with Jack, seeing the impact we can have, I get it. I just wish we hadn't lost so much time." "Time isn't lost if we learn from it," he said, squeezing her hand. "I'm so proud of the work you're doing, Claire, and even prouder of the person you've become." Tears rolled down Claire's cheeks as years of hurt and misunderstanding began to melt away. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, sweetheart. Always have. Always will." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun's rays paint the walls in warm, golden hues. For the first time in years, Claire felt truly at peace with her father, understanding both the man he was and the choices he had made. Claire stepped into the familiar office space, inhaling deeply. The scent of coffee and the gentle hum of conversation felt like coming home after her time away. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the bustling workspace. "Welcome back," Jack said, appearing beside her with 2 steaming cups of coffee. He handed her one, his eyes warm with understanding. "How's your father doing?" "Much better," Claire replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "The doctors say he's stable now. He's even starting to complain about hospital food, which is a good sign." She smiled, remembering their conversations over the past few weeks. "That's wonderful news." Jack gestured toward the conference room. "The team's waiting. We've made some progress while you were away, but we could really use your perspective." As they walked, Claire noticed subtle changes in the office: new charts on the walls, fresh plants in the corners, and additional workstations. The project had grown even in her brief absence. Inside the conference room, familiar faces greeted her with genuine warmth. Claire settled into her usual seat, pulling out her tablet and feeling more centered than she had in weeks. The time with her father hadn't just healed their relationship, it had given her a deeper understanding of the importance of their work. "So, where are we at?" she asked, diving right in. Jack clicked through a presentation, updating her on recent developments. The team had made progress on several fronts, but Claire noticed some gaps in their approach. Her mind raced with potential solutions, drawing on both her expertise and the wisdom she'd gained from her father's experiences. "I think we're missing an opportunity here," she said, standing up and walking to the whiteboard. With quick, confident strokes, she sketched out a modified implementation plan. "If we adjust our timeline and redistribute resources, we could increase our impact by at least 30%. The room fell silent as everyone studied her proposal. Jack walked closer to the board, his expression thoughtful. "This is brilliant, Claire. You found exactly what we've been missing." Claire continued explaining her ideas, her voice strong and sure. She outlined potential challenges and solutions, drawing from both her professional knowledge and her father's past experiences. The team listened intently, taking notes and asking insightful questions. After the meeting, Jack pulled her aside into his office. "I've been thinking," he said, leaning against his desk. "The Sustainable Agriculture Initiative we discussed before you left, it needs someone to take charge. Someone with vision, compassion, and the ability to see both the details and the bigger picture." Claire's heart quickened. The Agriculture Initiative was one of the project's most ambitious components, with the potential to transform farming practices across multiple regions. "I want you to lead it," Jack said simply. Claire blinked, processing his words. "Are you sure? It's such a crucial part of the project." "I've never been more sure of anything," Jack replied, his voice firm. "Your recent experience has given you a unique perspective. You understand now, better than most, how personal and professional dedication can work together. Plus, your solution today proved you're ready for this." Claire thought about her father, about the difficult choices he'd made in his career, about the lessons she'd learned. She felt a surge of confidence, knowing she could bring both professional expertise and personal understanding to the role. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady and determined. Jack smiled, extending his hand. The initiative is yours to lead. I know you'll make it something extraordinary. The office hummed with energy as the team worked late into the night. Computer screens cast a soft blue glow across tired but determined faces. Claire stood at her workstation, reviewing the final implementation plans for the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative. Empty coffee cups littered the desks around her, testament to the long hours everyone had put in. "Team meeting in 5 minutes," she called out, gathering her papers. The rustling of movement filled the room as people stretched and made their way to the conference area. Through the window, the city lights twinkled against the dark sky. Claire caught her reflection in the glass. She looked tired, but there was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there months ago. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father. "Proud of you, kiddo. You've got this." In the conference room, Claire spread out the latest reports. "We're in the final stretch," she announced, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "The pilot farms are showing incredible results, and we're ready to expand to the next phase." Sarah, one of the younger team members, pulled up the latest data on the screen. "The soil regeneration numbers are even better than we projected," she said excitedly. "The farmers are already reporting increased yields." Claire nodded, remembering her conversations with the local farming communities. Their initial skepticism had turned to enthusiasm as the results became clear. "This isn't just about numbers," she reminded the team. "It's about changing lives and protecting our planet." The meeting continued as they addressed final concerns and adjusted timelines. People spoke with the easy familiarity of a team that had been through challenges together. Even the technical discussions were punctuated by inside jokes and supportive comments. Hours passed as they fine-tuned the last details. The sky outside began to lighten, painting the horizon in soft pinks and oranges. One by one, team members headed home for a few hours of rest before the next push. Claire stayed behind, double-checking everything. She wanted to be absolutely certain they hadn't missed anything. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on her shoulders, but it was a weight she'd learned to carry with grace. "You should get some rest, too," Jack's voice came from the doorway. He looked as tired as she felt, his usually pristine suit slightly rumpled. "Just one more review," Claire said, shuffling through her papers. Jack walked over and gently took the papers from her hands. "It's ready, Claire. You've done an amazing job." She let out a long breath and sank into a chair. "I can hardly believe we're here. Sometimes I think about that dinner where we first met, me falling asleep on your shoulder." She laughed softly at the memory. "That was quite an introduction," Jack smiled, taking the seat next to her. "But I knew even then that you were exactly what this project needed." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant colors. The quiet moment felt precious after weeks of intense work. "Thank you," Claire said suddenly. "Not just for the opportunity, but for believing in me, for helping me see that I could make a difference." Jack turned to her, his expression serious. "You did that yourself, Claire. You took every challenge head on. You rebuilt your relationship with your father. You earned the trust of every person on this team." Claire felt tears prick at her eyes as she thought about how far she'd come. The scared, uncertain woman from that first dinner seemed like a lifetime ago. She'd found her strength, her purpose, and maybe even healed some old wounds along the way. Through the window, the sun continued its ascent, marking the beginning of a new day. Claire and Jack sat together, sharing this moment of quiet reflection as the world awakened around them. The grand conference hall buzzed with anticipation. Journalists filled the rows of seats, their cameras ready to capture every moment. Environmental activists, government officials, and corporate leaders mingled in the crowd, all drawn by the promise of a groundbreaking announcement. Claire stood backstage, smoothing her navy blazer for the 10th time. Through a gap in the curtain, she could see the massive screen displaying their project logo, a simple green leaf formed from interconnected lines. The same logo now adorned hundreds of farms across the country. 5 minutes until we're live, a stage manager called out. Claire felt a familiar flutter of nerves in her stomach. This wasn't just another presentation. This was the moment they'd reveal their work to the world. Months of late nights, countless revisions, and hard-won breakthroughs had led to this day. Her phone vibrated. A message from her father. "Watching the live stream from the hospital. Show them what we've accomplished, sweetheart." She smiled, remembering their long conversations about sustainable farming during his recovery. The lights dimmed, and Claire heard Jack begin his opening speech. His voice carried clearly through the speakers, confident and passionate as he introduced their initiative. Right on cue, Claire walked onto the stage, joining him at the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What we're about to show you isn't just a project, it's a revolution in sustainable agriculture." The presentation flowed smoothly as they unveiled their results. Gasps rippled through the audience when they revealed the dramatic improvement in soil health across their pilot farms. Charts showed impressive increases in crop yields, alongside significant reductions in water usage and chemical fertilizers. "But numbers only tell part of the story," Claire continued, clicking to a video montage. The screen filled with images of thriving farms, proud farmers standing in their fields, and time-lapse footage showing the transformation of once struggling land into vibrant, productive acreage. When they opened the floor for questions, hands shot up everywhere. Reporters leaned forward eagerly, their recorders held high. Claire and Jack handled each question with ease, their responses reflecting the depth of their knowledge and passion for the work. "This is revolutionary," one environmental journalist declared, her voice thick with emotion. "How soon can this be implemented on a larger scale?" Claire felt a surge of pride as she explained their rollout plan. The audience's enthusiasm was palpable. They understood the significance of what they were witnessing. This wasn't just another corporate initiative. This was real change happening in real time. As the presentation concluded, the applause was thunderous. People rose to their feet, some wiping tears from their eyes. Claire stood there, taking it all in, hardly believing this moment was real. Backstage, away from the crowd, Jack turned to Claire with a brilliant smile. "We did it," he said, his eyes shining. "Though I should say, you did it. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Claire." Claire felt tears welling up in her eyes as they hugged. The emotion of the moment overwhelmed her. All the hard work, the late nights, the challenges they'd overcome together. They'd done more than just complete a project. They'd created something that would continue to grow and make a difference long after today. They could still hear the excited chatter of the crowd through the curtain, the buzz of people who had just witnessed something extraordinary. Claire and Jack shared a look of pure joy, knowing that their work would help create a better, more sustainable future for generations to come. Claire watched her father making his way through the crowd after the presentation, using his cane but walking with determination. His silver hair caught the light from the conference hall's chandeliers, and though his face showed the strain of his recent illness, his eyes sparkled with pride. "That was incredible, sweetheart," he said, pulling her into a tight hug. The familiar scent of his aftershave brought back memories of her childhood, but this time without the usual sting of resentment. Claire squeezed back, grateful to feel his strength returning. Just months ago, she'd sat beside his hospital bed, uncertain if he would pull through. Now here he was, standing tall at one of the most important moments of her career. "I'm so glad you could be here, Dad," she said, stepping back to look at him properly. The color had returned to his cheeks, and he'd gained back most of the weight he'd lost during his hospital stay. They found a quiet corner of the conference hall, away from the bustling crowd still discussing the presentation. A waiter passed by with champagne, and Claire's father took 2 glasses, handing one to her. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "To family," Claire responded, clinking her glass against his. Her father settled into one of the plush chairs, setting his cane aside. "You know, watching you up there today, I couldn't help but think about all the times I tried to explain my work to you when you were young." Claire sat beside him, smoothing her skirt. "You mean when you'd go on and on about soil composition at dinner?" She smiled at the memory. "I used to think it was so boring. And now look at you," he chuckled, "making groundbreaking presentations about sustainable agriculture. Life has a funny way of coming full circle." "I understand now," Claire said softly, "why you were so passionate about it all, why it consumed so much of your time." Her father's expression grew serious. "I just wish I'd found a better balance between the work and being there for you." "We can't change the past, Dad." Claire reached over and squeezed his hand. "But we're here now, and watching you fight your way back to health these past months, it's helped me understand you better." Her father nodded, his eyes growing misty. "I've been thinking about the future," he said. "There's still so much work to be done in environmental conservation, so many projects that need attention." "Are you thinking of going back to work?" Claire asked, concerned about his health. "Not full-time," he assured her. "But I've got decades of experience that shouldn't go to waste. And now that we've rebuilt our relationship—" He paused, looking at her hopefully. "Well, I was wondering if you might be interested in collaborating on some new initiatives." Claire felt her heart swell with emotion. "I'd love that, Dad. We could combine your experience with some of the innovations we've developed here." "Together," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The way it always should have been." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the crowds of people still discussing the presentation. Through the conference hall's windows, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, a beautiful backdrop for this new chapter in their relationship. Her father squeezed her hand. "I'm so proud of you, Claire, not just for the work you've done here, but for the person you've become, for giving me another chance." Claire felt tears welling up in her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. Their relationship had weathered so many storms, but now, finally, they had found their way back to each other. And with their shared passion for environmental work, they had a clear path forward, together. Claire sat in Jack's office, going through the final project reports. The evening sun cast long shadows across the modern furniture, and the city lights were beginning to twinkle outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. She couldn't help stealing glances at Jack, who was focused intently on his computer screen. "I think we're done here," Jack said, looking up and catching her eye. His warm smile made her heart skip a beat. "Want to grab some dinner?" "I'd love to," Claire replied, gathering her papers. "The usual place?" "Actually," Jack said, standing up and walking over to her desk, "I was thinking somewhere different tonight, somewhere special." They ended up at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees outside, and soft music played in the background. It felt different from their usual working dinners, more intimate, more personal. "This is nice," Claire said, taking in the romantic atmosphere. "Very different from our late-night takeout sessions in the office." Jack reached across the table and took her hand. "Claire, these past months working with you have been incredible. Not just because of what we've achieved with the project, but because of you." Claire felt her cheeks flush. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "When I first met you at that dinner event, I never imagined where it would lead." "You mean when you fell asleep on my shoulder?" Jack teased, his eyes twinkling. "Oh, God," Claire laughed, covering her face with her free hand. "I still can't believe I did that." "I thought it was adorable," Jack said softly. "And I knew right then that there was something special about you." The waiter arrived with their wine, and Jack raised his glass. "To new beginnings?" "To new beginnings," Claire agreed, clinking her glass against his. As they enjoyed their meal, their conversation flowed naturally from work to more personal topics. They talked about their hopes, their dreams, and their vision for the future. Claire found herself opening up about things she'd never shared with anyone else. "You know," Jack said, "I've always kept people at arm's length, focused solely on my work. But with you, it's different. You make me want to let my guard down." Claire squeezed his hand. "I understand. After everything with my father, I was scared to let anyone get too close. But you've shown me that it's okay to be vulnerable, to trust again." "Claire," Jack said, his voice serious but gentle, "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air for a moment, and Claire felt her heart swell with emotion. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. Jack leaned across the table and kissed her softly, a kiss that held the promise of all that was to come. Later that evening, as they walked hand in hand through the quiet streets, Claire felt a profound sense of contentment. Just months ago, she'd been struggling with her career, her relationship with her father, and her own sense of purpose. Now, everything had changed. She had helped create a groundbreaking environmental project that would make a real difference in the world. She had reconciled with her father and found a way to blend their shared passion for environmental work. And now, with Jack, she had found someone who understood her completely, who challenged her to be better while accepting her exactly as she was. Looking up at the stars twinkling above the city skyline, Claire felt a surge of hope for the future. She squeezed Jack's hand, and he smiled down at her, his eyes full of love and promise. Claire stood at the podium, facing a packed auditorium of eager environmentalists and industry leaders. The spotlight felt warm on her face, but she wasn't nervous anymore, not like she used to be. 3 years had passed since that life-changing dinner where she'd fallen asleep on Jack's shoulder, and now here she was, delivering the keynote speech at the Global Sustainability Summit. "The future of our planet depends on the actions we take today," she said, her voice strong and clear. "It's not just about creating sustainable solutions, it's about making them accessible to everyone." From the front row, Jack watched her with pride, a subtle smile playing on his lips. Their relationship had grown stronger with each passing day, their shared passion for environmental work creating an unbreakable bond. After her speech, Claire mingled with the crowd, shaking hands and discussing future collaborations. A young woman approached her, clutching a notebook. "Ms. Bennett, your work on the Eco Project has been incredible," the woman said, her eyes shining with admiration. "You've inspired so many of us to pursue careers in sustainability." Claire felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you," she replied, remembering how she'd once been in this woman's shoes, dreaming of making a difference. "The most important thing is to believe in yourself and your vision." Later that afternoon, Claire sat in her office, now equal in size to Jack's, reviewing proposals for new environmental initiatives. Photos lined her desk, one of her and Jack at the project launch, another of her and her father working together on their latest venture, and a recent shot of the whole team celebrating their latest achievement. Her father knocked on the door, looking healthier than he had in years. "Ready for the site visit?" he asked. "Just give me a minute," Claire replied, gathering her things. Their relationship had transformed from one of tension and resentment to a partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. They now collaborated regularly on environmental projects, combining his experience with her innovative approaches. At the project site, Claire walked alongside Jack and her father, surveying the vast expanse of land that would soon become their newest sustainable development. Workers were already preparing the ground for what would be the largest urban farming initiative in the city's history. "Remember when you thought you'd blown your chance at that dinner?" Jack teased, taking her hand as they walked. Claire laughed. "How could I forget? I was mortified." "And now look at you," her father added proudly, leading the charge in sustainable development. They reached the highest point of the property, where the late afternoon sun painted everything in golden light. Below them stretched acres of land that would soon be transformed into a green oasis in the heart of the city. Claire felt the familiar surge of purpose that had become her constant companion. Jack squeezed her hand. "What are you thinking about?" "Just how far we've come," she replied, watching as workers marked out plots for the first phase of planting. "And how much further we can go." Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've accomplished more than I ever dreamed possible, Claire. You've taken everything I started and made it better." Claire looked out over the field, imagining the greenery that would soon flourish there. Gardens would bloom where there was now only dirt. Trees would grow where there were just markers, and people's lives would be transformed by having access to fresh, sustainable food. She had helped make this possible, and it was just the beginning.